Let's begin.
So I had a question about unwholesome states. And in one of the sutta, it says that one should abandon unwholesome states. And I was wondering if abandoning means suppressing, or if it's okay if they come up and one can just let them go without like reacting towards other people, or how to deal with like really negative emotions in a way that are coming up.
Yeah. You never want to suppress the emotions. You never want to suppress any of the hindrances that might arise. So if it's in the meditation process, you notice certain hindrances or distractions or strong emotions arising, let them be there. And then in the process of preventing, what you're doing is when you recognize you have stopped it from further flowing out, you stopped it from further distracting you or causing unwholesome states. Now, the arisen wholesome states that are currently present, you want to abandon, and that's by releasing your attention. You see, the more you put your attention on something, the more that something will grow. So the more you're able to put your attention on the loving kindness or whatever the Brahma Vihara might be, you will be able to allow it to expand and change in whatever way it does so. The mind will be able to do that. But likewise, when you have your attention on hindrances in the meditation, you're releasing your attention from it by taking it away from the distraction and coming back to mind and body. When you're doing that, you're exercising the rest of mindfulness, being aware of the mind and body, and then relaxing it, meaning letting go of the craving or the tension that might have arisen because of that. And then, of course, to replace what you have let go, which is the unwholesome state of mind, you come back to your smile, which then generates that wholesome quality of mind, and then continue on with your object of meditation and let that continue to flow. So this is how you're incorporating the 6R practice, and really what you're doing is exercising right effort by doing that. In daily life, when you come across situations where it can be difficult and there might be strong unwholesome states arising, there's a lot of value in pausing before you react. You might have already read in the text, in the material, and might have seen it in the video already. If not, you'll see that there's a lot of value in just pausing, allowing the mind to gather itself before reflexively reacting from an unwholesome state, from an unwholesome reaction. So instead, you want to wait, see where the mind is at. If it is agitated, you know that the mind is agitated. If it's upset, you know the mind is upset. So now you're exercising mindfulness. You recognize that, and then you release your attention away from it, and then relax it, and then come back to at least a neutral starting point, if not a wholesome starting point, when you're interacting with people or dealing with difficult situations.
I have a question, if I may, about something I noticed in the suttas, which is, I hope I get this right. There is contact, feeling, and consciousness. That's also a recurring theme in some of the things you might notice. For me, I sometimes have a bit of difficulty separating the three. So I get contact first for feeling and consciousness to arrive. I sometimes sort of put those last two in the same category, so to speak. Is there a way I can easily differentiate the two?
Yeah, so on the theoretical level, on the intellectual level, what you want to see is that contact is the stimulation of the sensory bases, meaning when the light hits the eye, when it hits the eye, meaning the photons hit the photoreceptors, that is contact. The stimulation of the eye, or the stimulation of the auditory nerves, or the stimulation of the olfactory nerves, or whatever it might be, that is contact. Immediately after contact, feeling arises, which is the sensation, the actual sensory experience, which is where you then see the light. Now, you mentioned consciousness. There is the consciousness of the stimulation happening when the light hits the eye. And there's also the consciousness of the feeling, the sensory experience itself, of seeing the eye, seeing the light. But then there's perception, which is recognizing what is being seen in the way of visual form. Recognizing is rooted in memory or learning. You start to conceptualize things based on your upbringing. So I use the example of the color blue, right? So you see a color, but you don't know it's blue until somebody tells you it's blue, or you have an understanding that it's blue. Now that's in your memory, that's in the formations. Now every time you see the color blue, number one, you have contact with that light, which shows blue, which is the contact, the stimulation, the feeling, which is seeing the blue, and then the perception, which is recognizing that that's the color blue. And all of these might seem to happen all together at one time, at the same time. But there is a very microsecond time span between each occurrence of what is happening. It can be quite difficult to separate the perception from the feeling, because as soon as you see it, you recognize it, which is the perception aspect of it. What's important to see is really noticing in your experiences, at least at the very level of feeling, meaning the sensations that are happening, is to make sure that the mind is not identifying with the sensory experience. The mind doesn't attach to it the idea that there is an ego experiencing it, that I am experiencing it, or that the mind immediately is attracted to it, which will then create craving, or the mind finds it displeasurable or unpleasant, and so it will have aversion towards it. It will try to run away from it. So the main point here is to, once you recognize what is happening in the way of the sensory experiences, don't allow that to get into mental proliferation. Don't allow it to cause the mind to become agitated by it or become attracted towards it. The moment you notice this, you're using mindfulness to let go of it, because as soon as you notice it, then you can use the process of seeing it, taking your attention away from it, relaxing, and then coming back to a more balanced state of mind.
See, thank you. That wasn't clear. Thanks. I do actually have another question about Sutta. It talks about, one of the things it talks about is sort of the awareness of the body within, awareness of a body without, and then does that with different things as well. Does that simply say being aware of a body, So like someone else has a body, or is it referring to something a bit different? I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah. So one of the ways to understand this is understanding that the body is impersonal. That in terms of the physical body, in terms of the processes within the physical body, the body that is here right now, it is impersonal. And what it's trying to say is basically this, or what should be understood from it is this. It likens the earth element, the internal earth element and the external earth element, the internal water element and the external water element, and so on and so forth. You could, in some sense, modernize this by understanding it to be the different states of matter. Earth being the solid state of the body, water being the liquid state, air being the gaseous state, and fire being the plasma state of the body. So what you're seeing is that this body is made up of the different elements of existence, of the universe. It's made up of different carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms and various different things. But in that whole process, what you're seeing is that there is no difference between what this body is and what it is made out of in terms of the earth and what is made out of in terms of other materials. And what that helps you with understanding is that this body has no sense of personal self. There's no controller here. It's just happening on its own biological processes. And in the same way as the earth material, the solid material, can be, it is usually inanimate, and doesn't have any kind of sense of consciousness there, any sense of personal self there. In the same way, this body that's here is also impersonal, insentient. It has no intelligence of its own, which is coming from some sense of a permanent self. It has its own intelligence in the way of cells that work on it on their own through causes and conditions. The same way that there is a sense of self that arises through causes and conditions.
See. Okay. Yeah, no, exactly. Thank you.
Hi, Delson. I would like to ask one question.
Yes.
How letting go the desire and whole a wholesome state while meditation?
Yeah. So the unwholesome desires that arise are distractions in the mind. They are hindrances that arise. It's the hindrance of sensual craving, for example. And what you have to see is when they arise, as soon as you recognize it, you have to see it and let it go by not paying attention to it. And just coming back to the mind and body and relaxing the mind and body, coming back to the smile, and then staying with your loving kindness or whatever your object of meditation might be. Now, that doesn't mean that the hindrance may completely dissipate all at once. It might arise again, but this time it will have a weaker hold on the mind. So it's a process of continually recognizing whenever your attention gets distracted by the unwholesome desire. And then the more you're able to let go of it through the 6R process or through right effort, the easier it becomes for you to recognize it much more quickly, and the less of an effect it has on the mind and its ability to have distractions in the mind. So it's essentially on a practical level, continually making sure that you release and let go of the unwholesome desire, and replace it with the wholesome object of meditation. So it's like a cycle. You have to continue to do it so that it will weaken its hold on the mind until it finally just is completely abandoned and it completely dissipates.
Thank you.
Hi, Delson. I wonder what should we report in the interview. I haven't done today's interview.
You really want to talk about any sort of sensations you might have experienced in the way of mind or body, any sense of change in the quality of the feeling, meaning maybe it started to turn into something else. You want to talk about how your attention was, your ability to continue to keep your attention on the feeling or whatever the object of meditation is, and what you did and how you used the 6R process to be able to come back to your object. So really you want to talk about these things, and then of course any problems you might be facing in the meditation.
Thank you.
Namo Buddhaya, Delson.
Hello, Bhante.
Thank you for your talks and your guidance. It's quite wonderful. And I was curious to know your perspective on why unwholesome states of mind manifest as tension in the body.
Yeah.
Or perhaps more emphasis on this relaxing step and what's its role and its correlation between the body and the mind.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know what you have to say about this.
Yeah. So if you consider when unwholesome states of mind arise, or in the way of something that might be wholesome, and then the mind gets attracted towards it and craves it and starts to, let's say, focus, that also creates tension in the mind. But let's just talk about the unwholesome. When you have craving or aversion, there is a sensation in the body that sort of has a tensing of the body. It's very subtle, and it's just a matter of your reaction, the reaction of the mind and the body towards that unwholesome state. And it can happen because of, in more modern terminology, because of that fight or flight sort of situation. So if you're averting or have aversion towards it, the mind starts to want to get away from it. And as soon as it happens on a physical level, where the blood pressure rises, the heart beat rises, and all kinds of things. The muscles tense up, and it can be very subtle. It can be quite subtle. And this is really the formations, the physical formations that are coming into action, coming into play. So when you are relaxing, number one, you're tranquilizing the bodily formations. You're relaxing the effect of the craving, whether it's in attachment or aversion, and you're relaxing that, and then you are replacing it with wholesome. Secondly, you are retraining the mind to come into a state of tranquility whenever any kind of unwholesome state arises. You're coming to a level of non-reactivity, non-reaction to what's occurring. You're allowing that pause to happen so that the tension doesn't clutch onto that unwholesome state of mind. So by doing that, what you're also effectively doing is you are exercising the awakening factor of tranquility by relaxing. You're coming into understanding how that works at a coarser level, and then of course on subtler levels of mind. So that's the importance of the relaxed step. And I just want to say thank you for making your presence available today.
Oh, well, pleasure. Thank you. I liked your take on focusing down awareness onto one pointed concentration in your talk today, and how it is related to, in fact, using craving to try to move away from craving. And I thought that was very, very good.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I was on muted then. I'm just wondering, Delson, about the sheath around the brain, the meninges. So tensions occurs there first off, nowhere else in the body?
Now, I would say there's tension not only in the brain, but there's also tension in the body as well. As I was saying, that there can be bodily tension that arises as a reaction to that craving.
Okay, so it's a mind-body, body-mind circuit, is it, Luke?
Oh, there's definitely a connection between body and mind. You think about it in this way: when you have a body that's tired and you sit down to meditate, you have a mind that's restless usually. And so if the mind is restless, the body can be tired as well. It can work vice versa. On the other side of it, if the body is too energetic, that too can cause restlessness. Likewise, if the body is sluggish, the mind can be sluggish. And if the mind is sluggish, the body might have no motivation to move and do anything. So there is definitely a very concrete connection between the body and mind.
So it can arise in the body first before it even comes near the meninges, yeah?
Yeah.
But it can influence the meninges too as well.
Right.
Thank you.
I also just want to add the importance of the relaxed step again in terms of tranquilizing the bodily formations. That in of itself is such a wholesome quality of mind. The feeling that arises from having relaxed attention, the feeling that arises from having relaxed the craving, is really a preview for Nibbana, for completely letting go. So that naturally inclines the mind towards letting go and then coming back into a wholesome state of mind.
I was wondering about the 7 factors of awakening and how the usual sequence is, for example, joy right before tranquility. But it seems like some other places, like the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha will talk about relaxing before cultivating the joy. And so it seems like these 2 things kind of look like they're working together.
Yeah.
What do you think? Does the joy calm the body or the mind, or does the calm brings up joy?
You know, the interesting thing about the Dhamma and, you know, a lot of the different elements of the Dhamma is that there's always this interconnectivity. There's always this interdependency, if you will. Even within the links of dependent origination, you have consciousness dependent on mentality and materiality, and materiality dependent upon consciousness. In the same way, when the mind has the experience of joy, it will naturally tend towards relaxation, naturally tend towards letting go, because it is so clear. When you are in a joyful state, when you are in a happy state of mind, the mind is naturally present. The mind is naturally clear. It has a natural clarity, and then that is resulting in tranquility. In the same way, if there is tension or there's agitation in the mind or the body, and you relax it and you have tranquility, there's a natural joy that emerges as a response to that tranquility, as a natural, wholesome reaction to having let go.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Today, going through the materials, I found that to be, I was really drawn into my head a lot. I found it, I almost wondered if it was counterproductive. It had that feel about it, that it was that way. Yes.
Yeah, about that, I will say that sometimes the material can be a little dense. It can have a lot of things to think about and reflect on. And if that gets in the way of the meditation practice, I will always suggest to take a break from reading it and spend more time in the meditation practice. Spend more time in having the experiences within the practice, because that will allow you to come back to the book at a later stage, and more importantly to the suttas at a later stage, and you'll be able to recognize things from the suttas which you weren't able to recognize before, let's say. And you'll be able to see certain elements and say from experience that, yes, I understand that now, or I see that now. So my general suggestion is that if it feels like there might be too many things going on there which will cause the mind to reflect and then go into mental proliferation, take a pause from the book and just come back to your practice. Okay, so let's share some merit. I believe Bhante Ananda will do the honors for sharing merit.
Do you make the honors, Delson, so I can share the slide?
Yes, I will. Give me one moment.
May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty powers, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Have a successful retreat, everybody. Thank you.
You